Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. In the glittering but perilous world of Los Angeles fashion, where family ties unravel as quickly as cheap silk and secrets fester like untreated wounds, the Forrester and Spencer clans had finally breathed a collective sigh of relief. Luna Nozawa, the once sweet intern who had descended into a whirlwind of murder, manipulation, and insanity, had vanished. Or so everyone thought. Her prison escape had ended in tragedy, or what the police called a terrible accident, when she raced into the road in a desperate attempt to flee justice, only to be hit by a passing vehicle. Dylan, a young woman, had come forward, weeping and shaking, confessing to the hidden run that killed Luna. Dylan, the unassuming art teacher who had briefly met the Forresters in Little Hayes preschool lessons, painted a picture of utter misfortune. Cloudy night, unexpected shadow in the headlights, brakes that couldn't stop in time. The authorities considered it an accident. No charges were brought, and the powerful families moved on, relieved that the horror known as Luna had been buried. Will Spencer, the beautiful young heir to the Spencer fortune, was one of Luna's top targets. She had seduced, drugged, and imprisoned him in a deluded attempt to claim him as her own, even believing for a while that she was carrying his kid. The miscarriage she experienced in prison further fueled her wrath before her catastrophic escape. Now that Luna had died, Will took solace in the embraces of Electra Forrester, the vivacious newcomer whose ideas were lighting up Forrester Creations. Their affection grew swiftly, a bright spot in the lingering gloom. Electra, ever compassionate, befriended Dylan following the confession, considering her as a fellow victim of Luna's chaos. After all, Luna had once tied Dylan up during one of her rampages. Electra drew Dylan into their circle, determined to help her overcome the shame of that tragic night. As the holidays neared in late December 2025, the beach house that had previously been Will's prison transformed back into a haven. Will and Electra planned to throw a casual gathering to shake off the year's darkness. They invited Dylan to join them for an evening of relaxation, perhaps a few drinks by the beach, and toasting to fresh beginnings. Dylan accepted graciously, her big eyes glistening with apparent vulnerability. She arrived with a bottle of wine and anecdotes about her persistent nightmares, including how the thud of impact lingered in her sleep. Will listened sympathetically, his powerful figure leaning against the kitchen counter as he poured drinks, while Electra clutched Dylan closely, vowing that time would heal the sorrow. The three of them laughed over supper, the sound reverberating throughout the large house that overlooked the breaking ocean. It felt therapeutic and nearly normal. However, normalcy was a delicate illusion in their society. As the night progressed, Dylan excused herself to the guest room supplied by Electra, citing tiredness from the emotional burden she carried. Will and Electra retired to their bedroom, murmuring about how amazing it felt to help someone go through hardship and how Dylan appeared so frail yet tough. They made love discreetly and passionately, reinforcing their bond in the aftermath of survival. Dylan was already up and pouring coffee in the morning, her face bright, but her gaze lingering on Will as he emerged shirtless from the shower. She complimented his physical appearance sweetly enough, but there was a flash, a yearning that Electra dismissed as imagination. Days passed into weeks, and Dylan became a regular. She dropped into Forrester Creations unexpectedly, carrying sketches inspired by Electra's work and sweets for the workplace. She texted Will articles about bereavement counseling and offered to listen if he ever wanted to talk about his experience with Luna. At first, it was touching. Will, who was still processing his own breaches at the hands of Luna, valued the empathy of someone who had also suffered as a result of her actions. Electra welcomed the friendship, seeing nothing wrong with engaging Dylan in their plans, movie nights, beach walks, even a weekend getaway. However, minor alterations began to emerge. Dylan copied Electra's style, wearing identical attire and mimicking her laugh. She recalled specifics about Will's preferences that he had only mentioned in passing during group discussions, such as his favorite coffee blend and how he wanted his steaks prepared. One evening, as snow flurries, rare for Los Angeles, dusted the city in a surreal seasonal veil. The trio reconvened at the beach home for a pre-Christmas gathering. Steffi and Finn momentarily joined Hayes in toasting to peace after pandemonium, but they left quickly, leaving Will, Electra, and Dylan alone once more. Wine flowed freely, and stories became increasingly intimate. Dylan confessed to deeper traumas, creating layers of abandonment in her background to create similarities with Will's complex familial relationships. When she laughed at his jokes, she lingeringly caressed his arm, tracing patterns that caused unwanted chills. Electra saw, but dismissed it. Dylan was simply affectionate, healing through connection. Dylan slipped into the living room that night, after Electra had fallen asleep, and found Will browsing through his phone next to the fireplace. She sat uncomfortably near, her words barely audible as she spoke of how strong he was and how Luna never deserved him. Will shuffled uneasily, thanking her while moving the topic back to safer ground. Dylan persisted, her eyes piercing, stating she understood him in ways others couldn't since they had both gazed into Luna's abyss. Before he could react, she leaned in, her lips brushing against his in a fleeting kiss that tasted of desperation and deception. Will stepped back, stunned, stammering that he loved Electra. Dylan apologized tearfully, blaming the drink and trauma before withdrawing to her room in pretended humiliation. The experience raised doubts, but Will chose not to inform Electra right away, not wanting to jeopardize the delicate support structure they had established for Dylan. Instead, he withdrew himself subtly, but Dylan adjusted. She began telling Electra about her burgeoning feelings for Will, portraying them as perplexing remains of hero worship. After all, he had been Luna's obsession, and his survival made him magnetic. Electra, who was overly sympathetic, told Dylan that his crushes had faded and that she was now family. However, Dylan's actions became more aggressive in private. She collected minor souvenirs, such as Will's forgotten tie and a hidden snapshot taken during a group outing. She practiced Electra's signature in a notebook, imitating her handwriting for reasons she kept hidden. The truth, the shocking revelation that no one anticipated coming, emerged on a stormy night in early January 2026. Will and Electra had clashed mildly about work stress at Forrester Creations, where rivalries between lines were rekindling. Dylan volunteered to mediate by asking them both to the beach house for a clear-the-air meal. Dylan offered a special dessert laced with a sedative she had obtained through murky online channels, mirroring Luna's tactics, but with deliberate accuracy. Will and Electra became drowsy and passed out on the couch. Will awoke hours later, disoriented and chained loosely to a chair in the same room where Luna had previously held him captive, and looked in horror at the figure before him. It was Electra's body on the floor, motionless, with blood pooling from a precise wound. Dylan, meanwhile, was standing over her with a knife in hand, wearing Electra's clothes, jewelry, and cosmetics with eerie realism. Or, more specifically, the lady he knew as Dylan. Her hair was styled like Electra's, and her stance reflected the confidence way. She turned to him, her smile twisted into something crazy and familiar. "Luna?" Will exclaimed, his voice breaking as understanding dawned. The woman chuckled, a terrifying combination of Dylan's sweet tone and Luna's wild edge. "Dylan is dead, Will. Just as you suspected." She approached, the knife glinting. "I planned it perfectly. That night I escaped prison, I arranged everything. A loyal accomplice, someone who owed me from my wild days, drove the car, struck a decoy body we had prepared, a homeless woman who looked enough like me in the dark. Dylan? Poor, naive Dylan stumbled into my web earlier. She was easy to manipulate after I tied her up that day at the Cliff House. I kept her hidden, drugged, until I needed her identity. When the accident happened, I killed her."
"Why?"
"Luna, it's over. You're insane." Her eyes blazed with wrath, then softened into false adoration as she knelt before him, stroking his cheek. "Insane? No, devoted. I did it all for you, Will. To shed the old Luna, the one everyone hated. To start fresh, get close to you without suspicion." Dylan was the perfect mask, innocent, traumatized, pitiable. "Electra welcomed me in, brought me to you. And now, she glanced at Electra's lifeless physique. Now, there's no one in our way. I'll be Electra for a while, long enough to comfort you in your grief. We'll bond over losing her. You'll see me as your savior. And eventually, you'll love me, the real me, again. However, Luna's meticulous plot began to crumble almost immediately. Electra stirred slightly on the floor. The sedation had worn off faster than expected, and the wound was minor, intended to provoke a struggle. She had pretended to be unconscious, waiting for her time. As Luna rambled on about her twisted logic, Electra sprang silently, seizing a large vase from the side table and shattering it against Luna's head. Luna fell and the knife clattered away. Will swiftly freed himself, going to Electra as she called the cops. Sirens blasted in the distance, gathering toward the beach home once more. Luna, bleeding but alive, was apprehended, this time for good, her impersonation exposed by DNA testing on the actual Dylan's remains, which were discovered concealed in an abandoned warehouse, along with evidence of the fabricated death. The consequences spread throughout the households. Steffi and Finn struggled with the betrayal of believing Dylan, with Finn particularly troubled by nearly embracing his daughter's imposter. Will and Electra's friendship became stronger as they survived the trauma, forming an unshakable trust. The scandal erupted at Forrester Creations, yet life went on, designs were sketched again, and loves bloomed amid the ruins. But in the quiet moments, Will wondered how close he had gotten to falling into Luna's web again. Dylan's meekness had sometimes concealed Luna's fury, making the impersonation faultless. It served as a vivid reminder that in their world, death was rarely final, and monsters might assume the identities of friends. Luna, who is now facing many murder charges, including Dylan's, languished in a maximum security facility, her fantasies shattered. But murmurs persisted. Were her accomplices still out there? Or was this really the end? The brave and beautiful continued on, hearts bruised but throbbing, constantly wary against the darkness that hid behind familiar smiles. Will gripped Electra harder that night, determined never to let falsehood pull them apart again. The ocean waves smashed outside, washing away the blood, yet memories remained as timeless as the tides. Dylan's death produced a quiet shudder across a small group of people, but the facts never surfaced. Officially, there was confusion, partial responses, and unanswered queries. Unofficially, the story ended when Luna opted to enter Dylan's life and wear it as a second skin. What began as a frantic act of survival quickly morphed into something darker, more premeditated, and far more dangerous, particularly as Will became the focal point of her scheme. Luna has always been on the periphery of other people's lives, observing, listening, and learning. She understood how readily perception might be influenced by saying the right things at the right moment. When Dylan died, Luna realized that the hush surrounding her death presented an opportunity. Dylan had been quiet, evasive, and recently estranged from the majority of those who knew her well. That distance created Luna's shield. The fewer people who genuinely knew Dylan, the easier it would be to emulate her. Luna initially convinced herself that it would just be temporary. She required access, money, protection, and answers, which Dylan's connections might supply. Slipping into Dylan's persona was intended to be a means to a goal. But the moment she took on that role, answering Dylan's name and seeing recognition in other people's eyes, something changed inside her. Power replaced fear, and confidence replaced hesitancy. Will was the variable for which Luna had not entirely prepared. Dylan's relationship with him was difficult, with many unfinished conversations and unresolved emotions. When Luna addressed him as Dylan, she expected suspicion and possibly rage. Instead, she discovered longing. Will wanted to believe Dylan was there in front of him, alive and unharmed. That yearning made him vulnerable, and Luna recognized it right away. Their initial interactions were careful, with subtle tests on both sides. Will paid close attention to her, looking for familiar patterns and shared memories. Luna responded with meticulous mimicry, reciting things she had remembered, adopting Dylan's demeanor, and relying on emotional ambiguity when details became too specific. When she didn't know something, she reacted with comedy or claimed to have changed. Will accepted such explanations more readily than he should have, because the alternative was too painful to contemplate. As Luna spent more time with Will, her mimicry became increasingly believable. She learned about his routines, limitations, and the guilt he felt over Dylan's alleged absence. Luna tapped into her shame, softly reinforcing the notion that his absence and emotional distance had led to her want to disappear. It wasn't overt manipulation at first, simply gentle nudges that prompted Will to make amends. Luna had not anticipated how soon her own emotions would become entangled. Playing Dylan around Will meant reliving scenes she had only seen from afar. She witnessed the depth of his loyalty, his protectiveness, and the sincerity of his apologies. Luna had moments when she forgot she was pretending, when she felt viewed as someone worthy of affection rather than an imposter. Those times terrified her more than the threat of exposure. Meanwhile, fractures in the illusion started to appear elsewhere. Small contradictions emerged after talks with people who knew Dylan differently than Will did. A childhood acquaintance observed a shift in tone. A former colleague noticed something wrong with her priorities. Luna disregarded these concerns as trauma-induced transformation, relying primarily on the story that surviving whatever had drove her away had profoundly changed her. Most individuals accepted this explanation because of courtesy or discomfort. Few wanted to challenge a woman who claimed to have been through so much. Behind the scenes, Luna fought desperately to conceal her identity. She intercepted messages, removed digital footprints, and avoided circumstances that may reveal her lack of shared history. She separated Dylan's background, treating it like a role rather than living it. Every day became a show, and each contact necessitated calculations. However, Will became closer. He confided in her, openly discussed his anxieties, and shared future plans that included her by default. Luna supported these chats, even if they exacerbated her internal turmoil. The closer Will felt to Dylan, the more important the stakes got. Ending the deception would destroy him. Continuing would eventually destroy them both. The truth about Dylan's death lingered like a shadow, known only by Luna. She had been present in Dylan's final moments, witnessed life leave his eyes, and had chosen silence over accountability. Luna refuses to discuss whether the death was accidental or deliberate. Recognizing it would imply acknowledging that her impersonation was more than just a theft of an identity, it was the erasing of an existence. As the weeks passed, Will began to see minor discrepancies that he couldn't ignore. A shared recollection did not land as he had hoped. A strange, lingering stare. He originally rejected these doubts, blaming them on his own nervousness. However, once planted, skepticism tends to thrive. Will began asking questions, not angrily, but constantly. Luna sensed the shift right away. To keep control, Luna heightened the emotional link. She spoke of starting over and leaving the past behind completely. She suggested breaking relationships with those who made her uncomfortable, seeing it as an essential step toward recovery. Will paused, but understood her point of view. He was unaware that each destroyed connection lowered the number of people who could reveal the truth. Still, danger drew closer. Someone initiated an independent investigation into Dylan's alleged disappearance, following document trails Luna had not completely deleted. A hospital record, a witness, and a timetable that did not match. Luna felt the pressure increasing, and the performance grew more difficult to maintain. Sleep evaded her, and paranoia replaced assurance. Luna questioned why she continued in her few, peaceful moments alone. She might disappear again, abandon Dylan's identity, and start over somewhere else. But going away meant losing Will, and the loss was excruciating. Luna wasn't sure if it was guilt, love, or obsession. She only knew that Will had become the reason she stayed. Will, for his part, was on the verge of understanding. His instincts warned him there was something wrong, but his emotions begged him not to listen. The notion that Dylan wasn't Dylan threatened to rekindle scars that had only just healed. Nonetheless, he began paying more attention, piecing together bits of skepticism. The tension between them became subtle but consistent. Conversations became fraught with unanswered questions. Luna sensed the shift and answered with candor, revealing concerns and insecurities similar to Will's. It was a risky technique, attaching him emotionally while the truth remained just out of grasp. As the walls drew in, Luna was presented with an impossible decision. She could confess and risk everything, including her freedom and the bond she had with Will. Or she might double down, eliminating threats and pushing the deception even further, even if it meant breaking lines she had previously promised she would never do. Dylan's death, once hidden beneath layers of denial, now influences every decision Luna makes. The imitation was no longer just a way to get close to Will. It had become her entire life. Luna had lost her sense of self after losing Dylan's name and face. The longer the deceit lasted, the more inevitable the consequences became. No matter how skillfully disguised, the truth eventually comes to light. When it does, it will not only reveal Luna's lies, it will also force Will to face the fact that the woman he trusted, confided in, and loved was never who she claimed to be. When that moment arrives, the effects will be felt by everyone who is involved in Dylan's life and death. Luna may have succeeded in getting close to Will, but the cost could be considerably more than she anticipated.